Hello and welcome to the Check Out This Record podcast. My name is Frank. I'm with my good buddy Marc. This is a podcast where we find albums for one another and then we have to give our honest opinion and review. You can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and follow us on Instagram and now even YouTube. If you listen to our last episode, one of us loved the suggested album and the other one hated the album suggested with the fire from the Greek gods. And you know what, Marc?
What's that, Frank?
It was beautiful, my friend. It was beautiful. Don't you think it was awesome?
It really was, Frank. And speaking of Greek gods, I love 27 of Baskin-Robbins' 31 flavors. And there's a reason they carry 31 flavors.
There's something for everyone, baby, right?
Absolutely. And rock and roll is not all that different. If you think of an ice cream shop, each band with its own style and flavor, albums with different toppings and good stuff mixed inside, that's going to be like the cherries and the walnuts you like, buddy.
Yeah, man.
You know? And then you get all that good stuff mixed in there. You're bound to play differently on each person's different little earbud taste drums. You know, taste bud eardrums. You know what I'm trying to say, right?
Of course.
Everyone's got a little bit of a different flavor here, and that's kind of the fun thing about rock and roll and music. You know, in the U.S., there are 4 billion people, Frank.
Wow.
With 1 in every 100 in a band, and the average band having about 4 people in it, it's about 1 million bands alone right now in the U.S.
Insane.
Solo acts, side projects, jazz ensembles, noise artists, that dude farting on a snare drum. Truly 31 flavors for everybody.
Absolutely. And on a side note, only half my house can have walnuts because the other half will be affected by allergies. But I like them, so I just wanted to go on record in saying that. And I couldn't agree more. And you know what, Marc? I was thinking of the band The Ataris. You know them, right?
Yep, San Dimas High School football rules, buddy.
Yeah. Well, you know, what's weird is I saw their 2020 tour schedule, and man, it amazes me how their popularity has absolutely plummeted. I mean, they're playing bars and dives. Didn't you think that they were a little bit bigger, or was that just me in my head thinking they were bigger?
It's definitely a surprise that they're playing some smaller venues. Remember that So Long Astoria went gold.
Right. Personally,
I was a Blue Skies and Broken Hearts Next 12 Exit kind of guy and really didn't get deep into the albums past that.
Yeah, and what's crazy is supposedly that the album that did them in was this album called Welcome to Night. And in retrospect, to me, I think it's underrated, but it's fascinating how one album can literally sink the ship. Marc, your thoughts on that one album possibly doing that?
You know, I remember giving this album a pass, and it didn't particularly jump out at me. I did think that it was darker than its kind of prototypical pop-punk predecessors. Of course, the band did take a 10-year gap in between that and the next record.
Yeah.
And I honestly just chalked that up more towards the decline of pop-punk than necessarily anything to do with the band.
Right.
But like I said, I really wasn't paying attention to what they were doing and couldn't tell you why that gap happened in there.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of a mystery and pretty fascinating if you ask me. And I just mentioned the word underrated and related it to that album I was talking about, Welcome to Night, but there's a lot of overrated crap too. And me and you have had our share of talking about that throughout the years. Let's do a quick top 5. Let's do our first 5 overrated artists that we could think of, shall we?
Absolutely. So top 5 overrated artists. And as always with me, in no particular order, but in exact order. And please bring on the hate meal because I pretty much hate all of these bands. Number 5, the Eagles, the Grateful Dead, following in shortly behind at number 4. Number 3 is Fish. Number 2 is Bon Jovi. And at number 1, I think a lot of people will give me the most crap about this. I can't stand U2. I'd be happy if I never heard another U2 song again. What about you, Frankie?
Oh, man. And I'm laughing because I would probably have the same top 5, and of course we want to keep things different, so these are the first 5 that came to my mind, but solid choices by you, my friend. So here we go. So we got Coldplay, just don't understand them. Ed Sheeran, I mean, that's a whole episode in itself. Elton John, Billy Joel, and of course, number 1 is Taylor Swift. I mean, even my girls are getting tired of her. She's as overrated as they get. Now, I'm not discounting her business savvy nature and how well she markets her brand. She's very talented there. I'm talking strictly music. It's nothing special. You give me 1 week, I'll research and find you 10 pop stars that are probably have better voices end songs. And what's most incredible is her mafia. If you critique her in any way, I mean, I've seen people get destroyed by saying her songs aren't good. It's almost comical, my friend.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you put yourself right in the Taylor Swift mafia crosshairs, buddy.
Yeah, man.
I'd like to take a moment to put out there that this podcast, we are pro-mafia, like the actual mafia.
Yes.
Because those guys get stuff done.
Yeah. Hey, listen, they're achievers, right?
They certainly are achievers.
All right, my man. So should we do this? You want to get to the reviews?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I went first last week. So how about you do the honors, my friend?
Sure. I'm pretty stoked as we've got our first listener request.
First listener request.
Of mine. Yeah. My buddy Shriver asked us to check out Once by Finnish symphonic metal band Nightwish.
Ooh.
So here we go. Released in 2004. This is the band's fifth studio album with singer Taja Trunin. I apologize for butchering your name, ma'am. On lead vocal strength. Did I lose you already?
Yes, I'm totally lost, my friend.
Well, you and I are completely in the minority on this one. You see, the Ataris we just mentioned have an average of 700,000 monthly listeners.
Wow.
The Afghan Whigs, just 84,000. That's the album I'll be critiquing once I'm done with this one. And then, of course, the band, the Casket Lottery that I asked you to listen to for this week is only 4,000 listeners a month. And, of course, I am referring to the Spotify listener numbers that they bring up underneath the name of the band when you just search them in general.
Sure.
So, Nightwish, 1.5 million listeners a month.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, all of the stuff that we brought up beforehand doesn't even come close to the amount of people listening to this every month. They had 6 number one albums in their home country of Finland.
Oh.
Once being the album that saw the band get to America and sold 1 million copies alone. I don't know if that's 1 million copies in the U.S. or worldwide,
right?
But nobody's shaking a stick at 1 million copies anywhere you go. So I think the closest thing to this style that you may be familiar with, just kind of in the regular day-to-day world of not listening to symphonic metal, was a band called Dragon Force that was pretty popular a little while ago. Ringing any bells for you?
No, absolutely not.
Well, good job, Frank. So we're talking about lots of kind of galloping guitar parts, over-the-top musical themes, your kind of classic wizards and wars and princesses and high drama, dare I say, very nerdy shit. It's one of those things. I'm tempted to make fun of it, but the fact of the matter is that we're looking at really well played guitar parts. We're looking at really tight rhythm sections. These guys add a lot of symphony strings and horns to them. And then Taja, whose last name I won't try to butcher again, is a classically trained opera singer. This was her last record with the band. I did listen to some of the stuff before it and some of the stuff after it. I definitely appreciate her talent. It makes for a pretty cool audio aesthetic to have this very epic, grand, almost adventurous Lord of the Rings, if you will, style of music going on, this very grandiose thing. It reminded me a lot of kind of going to the opera and why that would be cool.
Right.
With that said, I don't think you or I are going to the opera that much. Nor are we listening to operatic albums in our free time. Me, I always like to judge something by whether or not I can fuck to it. And I mean, you could probably definitely fuck more to this than you could to some opera.
Yeah.
Not that this was bad. I'm not really into a symphonic metal thing.
Right.
It was fun.
Yeah.
I just don't know that I would listen to it more than because somebody asked me to.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of those things, you're probably getting outstanding musicianship. I mean, probably some of the playing is absolutely impeccable. There's a lot though that could really create some intense music, and it's like you almost have to be in the mood for it. I mean, you piqued my interest enough to just hear what it is. Again, I think you have to be in the mood for that niche. You probably heard some great musicians, but Yeah, I think that was pretty cool. You got to do that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I would definitely recommend people who are not used to it, check it out, especially if you love grand adventure style movies, if you like epic soundtracks and scores. This is just heavy metal based on those themes, so it's kind of cool. I really dig it. I'd like to thank Shriver for suggesting it to us. Lord knows I probably wouldn't have listened to it without his suggestion.
Nice.
But with that said, Frank, would you kindly remind our listeners and myself what album I'll be reviewing and why you wanted me to check this out?
Totally, man. So the Afghan Whigs, Black Love, it came out in 96, and this is the band's fifth album. Lead singer Greg Dooley was looking into creating a movie that had film noir elements, but it never happened, and that ultimately led to some of the songs on Black Love. Initially, it wasn't that well received as the album before Gentleman, which is widely viewed as the band's best, but Black Love to me refines the band's ability to play loud rock and roll songs, toned down quiet tunes, and their special mix and love for soul music that they have. Greg Dooley's voice is not perfect, but to me it always worked, and the imperfections make the overall sound better. So this is one of my favorite albums, and I'm really amped to hear what your thoughts are on it.
Well, Frank, this album kicks ass.
Nice.
I flew into Denver, if you know what I mean,
Nice.
for the first listen on this, and I was blown away. Subsequently, on revisiting it back home and while driving around town and doing the various things that people do as they listen to records, where you can be free to do things without inebriation. This album didn't let me down at all. It really rocks. It gets funky, and dare I say, it's got a little Elvis Costello just kind of buried deep within it.
Yeah.
Which none of these are bad things for me. I really dig it, man. Greg Dooley on the record, both vocally and lyrically, the way he sings, you're right. It's not the prettiest singing voice, but it feels honest. And for the band's sound, I really like the way it fits in there. It's genuine, which really goes a long way today compared to what a lot of the pop singers are doing and the way they're playing with their voices. I also like the way he uses the words he wrote. Right. And his pronunciation. I know that seems like kind of a silly thing to say you like about a singer, but I like when you look at his lyrics, he really is using the entire word that he wrote, and it works with his singing style. It really just puts you even more into each song because he does keep you in there in the depth of his lyrics and writing. I really liked the first three songs on this album. It really sets just an amazing, funky rockin' tone that carries throughout the rest of the album. Tracks 6 and 7, Going Into Town and Honky's Letter, are easily two of my favorite tracks on the album. And I didn't know this until I was kind of sitting down and writing out what I wanted to say about this. Those were the album singles.
Yeah.
I think I picked some great tracks based on just what kind of moved me. And I guess the band agreed by releasing them as singles. Tracks 5 and 8, the two tracks surrounding them, Stepping Into the Light and Night by Candlelight, they broke up the record in terms of pacing with their kind of slower, slightly darker and moodier vibe. They're both good tracks. They just they perhaps went on a little longer than I would have liked. They felt more like interludes that extended a little longer. But I'm really willing to be very forgiving because the rest of the album was just so damn good. Doubleday and Bulletproof are the songs that really screamed Elvis Costello to me.
Yes.
Funky, dark, rockin'. Plus, there's this one stanza from Doubleday that I just absolutely love that to me was just like, I don't know if they're trying to pay homage to Mr. Costello in this. I just really love the way these lyrics came out. It was a Saturday. I came home early, drunk with love and other things.
Love that line.
Confess, I love it all. Yeah, it's just one of those, like, again, he's using the entire word when he sings, and he's writing really thoughtful, deep lyrics. Really sucked me in. Really great record. I want to buy this record.
Yeah.
I want to invite people over, and I want to force them to listen to it.
It's so good.
It's so good. Like, sitting down at first, I was thinking to myself, is this one of those records when you know that you know cool music you put on? Yeah, man, I think it is. I think this is just one of those, like, this is how cool rock and roll can really be kind of records. It's absolutely great. And like I said, I'm 100% going to try to find this record and force people to listen to it when they come over.
Yeah, it's just that overall vibe, and maybe those two songs that you mentioned, kind of breaking things up. That could have been based on the way Greg wanted to make it, maybe into thematic and into a movie and stuff like that. Because I always view that album as being in two parts, and what I really like is how loud they could get too, just like a overall loud rock and roll band with My Enemy and Honky's Ladder. I love the way what they're doing with the guitars, and I know we were talking about that too.
Yeah, no, definitely great full sound, right? They've got the full band to really produce that kind of sound. I think it's really interesting. You see it as two pieces to the record. I kind of see it as three.
Yeah.
Those opening tracks, really stepping into the light. Then those two middle tracks, which ended up being released as the singles. And then I see the third part being everything that comes after Night by Candlelight. Because the end of the album does just kind of stay a little funky. It still totally rocks in a great way. I don't want to mean to put it down by any means.
Sure.
But it kind of has, to me, it has three pieces, and I really like the way they did it. The album's just under an hour in length. It's 11 tracks. Definitely fun. Definitely one of those you can throw this on while people are there and just kind of enjoy listening to it without it. It's not going to overwhelm, but if you really want to dive deep into this record, there's a lot to get into.
Nice. So I think now you could easily say that you're a fan of the Afghan Whigs, right?
Definitely. One of the fun things, and I think people are going to figure this out as they're listening to the podcast, is that one of the things you and I like to do is see where bands begin and end, not just focus on the one record. Although, there may be some situations where, I hand you something that's only got the one record,
Yeah, totally.
And that's cool. But these guys in particular, I know, what's the album before this that everybody kind of praises?
A Gentleman.
Gentleman. Was probably my least favorite of the rest of their catalog.
Right.
Really enjoyed the first album, which Frank is going to tell us the name of.
Up in It.
Up in It, yes. Really great stuff. Like, I really enjoyed these records. I thought they were a lot of fun to get into. The extended 20th anniversary stuff was really cool. I liked that additional audio, the additional tracks, the extensions to it. I really thought that they added to the record in an honest way without just being like, hey, here's some kind of poorly recorded demos. They were really nicely done.
Yeah, what was cool is that it kind of had that little funky movement vibe to it, and what amazes me, and I said this in my intro to it last week, is they were on Sub Pop Records, which was the grunge label. So the fact that they got plucked out of Cincinnati and put onto that label, I find it to be very fascinating.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and that's, I think, one of the things you, me, and the listeners are going to discover together is what effect did record labels have on albums and bands?
Yeah.
And what effect did bands have on those record labels? What kind of credibility did the Afghan Whigs extend to something like Sub Pop? Beyond, hey, we know who the cool grunge bands in our neighborhood are. So I think that's something that we can certainly start looking at, and something that as a collective we start thinking about and kind of understand the way record labels, especially the independent ones, were really trying to operate.
Yeah.
I think as we look at kind of more mainstream bands, it's going to be easy to say that, they just pushed a certain agenda or they liked a certain sound. But when it comes to the independent guys, what did those collections of bands mean for them, and how did it affect their overall approach and philosophy to music? I think it's a really interesting question that we'll be able to kind of dive into as we continue this little experiment that is a podcast. Yeah,
I would love to know what their intent was. It's like, hey, this is kind of the label we are, and this is the kind of band they are. So where's that happy medium? Is there a happy medium? What does that look like? I think we might be uncovering some answers eventually, which will be cool.
Yeah, I think it'll be very cool. So you ready for your turn?
I am, my friend. Bring it on.
So the Casket Lottery, don't mind my pronunciation. The Casket Lottery, Survival is for Cowards. I tried not to overthink this one. I think that why it works so well as a record for me is that it's pretty straightforward in nature. I love a good three-piece band. You and I were in a three-piece, depending on who was putting the band that week, quite often. but I love when a three-piece can really fill out and have a full sound with its instruments. When we get two singers that can harmonize with each other but still have very distinct voices and sounds. I just think this was a really cool record for you and for how I'm seeing you grow. So what did you think?
All right. So the Casket Lottery, Survival is for Cowards, released in 2002. So I knew nothing of this band previously. They toured I Know It's Small Brown Bike and Rocky Vodolato, which I am familiar with. But prior to listening to that, I had no idea what their songs would sound like. And last night we talked briefly of that category, emo. And that's a tough one because I must say it always, even though I dig bands with that label, it always makes me cringe. Do you get that too when you hear that?
And maybe it's because I don't consider myself emo. I know that my wife does. Well, she considers herself emo. She doesn't consider me emo. I've always seen emo as kind of a negative connotation.
Yeah.
I'm sure that that's wrong. I'm sure that it's, we're speaking about emotional music.
Right.
I don't really think that's a valid way to categorize music, but you know what? Labels ruin everything, so
they do. And what's funny is the first technically emo band was Rights to Spring, which is fronted by Guy Picciotto, better known for his time in Fugazi, right? And when I listened to them in the past, I didn't equate to what they were doing to what was known as emo, especially in the early 2000s when emo was really popular. So it's like it was just really post-hardcore with more melody, and then they just came up with a name. So I think it fits the bill for a number of different bands. You're right, there is a negative connotation with it, but I've known just some regular rock and roll bands, which I consider things like, the bands like the Get Up Kids now just to be a regular rock and roll band, but they still have that label because maybe they dropped one more emotional album. But yeah, I agree with you on that. And let's get into the album. So Survival is for Cowards. So it kicks off with Code Red. It's a steady drum beat with quiet verses and a loud build-up to the chorus. It quickly reminded me of some stuff Sunny Day Real Estate was doing along with Jimmy Eat World. They've also had, of course, that emo label. The bass riffs really carry the quiet melodic guitar. The switch from loud to quiet and back again, I think, is a staple for that genre, and singer Nathan Ellis has a voice similar to even Jesse Lacey of Brand New and the singer from Crime in Stereo. Mark, did you pick up any of those vibes when you were listening to that? Because I know you're familiar with both those bands too. Yeah,
I definitely kind of picked up that early 2000s sound.
Yeah.
Which is weird because for me there's there's emo and then there's pop punk and then there's kind of that world where the two collided, and I think maybe I just assumed those two worlds were one, or like I said, maybe because I didn't consider myself emo, I just assumed that, the bands I liked with that label weren't really that. I don't know.
But I mean, I think you're onto something here. I think this album may be that collision right there, maybe a little bit of that. Next up is What I Built Last Night. It didn't start that well for me. The lyrics, "Oh, me of little faith," repeating. I thought the melody for the guitars was wrong. And even though I can't express it verbally, I heard something else. Now, this is just an opinion that I'm going to have in my own head.
Sure.
And I also realize the challenge I have with bands with that style is that they keep that steady rhythm for so long. And to me, it leaves a little room for variance. I for that song, was just hearing something completely different. And again, I can't even verbalize it. Then we move on to the bridge. To me, this is classic melodic emo indie intro with the guitar here. One thing I would like to see is a change up in pace, because 3 songs in and we're getting that same tempo, which those 2 previous bands I mentioned, Sunny Day Real Estate, they did that a lot. And that first Jimmy Eat World album, Static Prevails, had that too. So I think that is the recipe, right? 4 Apples, that brings the same type of tempo, but I must say the music is layered. And it really, to me, it created this imagery, to be honest with you. And based on that, I think there are things that work. And then I also think that there's some things that didn't work. And for me personally, with the style of music, like I need the lyrics to be very, very detailed. And so for Apples, for example, they had some things like, there are things we need to work out, so just come back. But I needed more information, like, is she a cheater? Are you the cheater? Do you have deep-rooted issues? Is there therapy? Are you going to a therapist? Like, those are the things I was thinking, just because the music is so intricate. So I wanted more intricate lyrics with it. Searchlights to me really marked the first change on the album. I like the clean verses, and the guitar breakdowns are really cool. I get a 90s vibe here, and I felt they tried to, like you said, work on the harmonies and make that almost an anchor for the album. So digging that song for sure. Getting By has a great opening riff, and the bass is nice here, and it's very thick to me. I almost get a dream pop feeling here, and I love the middle with the heavy guitars and the screaming vocals. That adds a nice aggressive feeling to me. Now, we talk about another genre, Mark, but to me this seems like where shoegaze came from. Are you familiar with shoegaze?
Vaguely, but I'm going to let you try to define it, because it's such a weird genre.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like this dream-filled music with guitars, but it's, to my knowledge, it's like the guitar players were looking down constantly doing that, because that's kind of, I guess, mimicking the vibe of the song, therefore looking at their shoes, therefore gazing at their shoes.
Right.
And I again, who knows? I bet all these bands kind of cross into those realms. But yeah, I kind of got that feeling on there too. It was dreamy. It was definitely a dreamy feeling. So I kind of got that vibe. Since You, although coming in at 2:45, that seemed too long for me. I think it drags, and there was a lot more that song left on the table. But the following song, Sick, I was like, all right, this is a different tempo. It's like that punk style song that the emo bands put together in their album to be like, hey, listen, we could also do something else. Do you notice that sometimes, Mark?
Hey, we can play your shows. Look, we got this song that fits in with what you guys do. Your fans won't leave. No, yeah, it's definitely, I think, again, people are going to hear me complain about why we label styles of music.
Right.
You look at all these bands that know each other, that, they do the old Margate shuffle where everybody steps to the left and picks up the different instrument.
Yeah.
And you've got all these bands and all these different influences, and those are going to come across on records. And I think this, you definitely picked out a good song to show where, like, it's a bit of a break from what the rest of the album sounds like, although it all fits in the same kind of hum and glow of the record. It's a little different. So I did pick up on that.
Okay, cool. And I could just imagine seeing it live. It'd be like, okay, here's these mid-tempo songs, and then Sick rolls around, and then that really gets the crowd going, So I'm sure it's intentional. Yeah, and it definitely makes sense. Leaving Town, that features, from what I could tell, is the first use of the acoustic guitar. I like the guitar work. It sounds nice and crisp and clear. The song did, however, make me realize the challenge again I was having with the album from the beginning, and just, I think it's the lyrics a little bit. Again, I felt they were too textbook for the music, and again, the details were definitely highlighted musically. I just wish they were also highlighted lyrically as well. The album now ends with Heaven Help Me, and it's a fitting end to the album. It features most of what we heard before in the previous 9 songs. This is the band's recipe on the album, and they're not afraid to display it, which, hey, that's the style. So that was the last track. Now, what I liked the classic textbook sound of the genre. They said this is what we are. I felt it was important to them to display that, and again, it shows how the songs were crafted. Code Red, Searchlights, Getting By, they were my favorites. What I didn't care for, again, the lack of variance musically, I felt was too steady for me, and it lost me a little bit. It definitely sounded like the early 2000s. I clearly remember so many bands similar to that, and then poof, they were gone. And although I like some of the bands, it was definitely a challenge to get vested. Lyrically, I felt it was surface level. I would have liked more imagery with some of the words. Again, that's just me. It might not have hurt, again, just to add more lyrically depth words in there. The moment that never came, I was like, okay, it's going to get good now, and then it fell flat. And sometimes there's too much instrumentation, and when you have some weaker lyrics, in my opinion, it doesn't create memorable lyrics. Now, this album to me is not bad at all. I just don't think it's memorable. It's there. It didn't move me the way that Leatherface album did. And maybe that's a unfair assessment, because I absolutely love that album and was still listening to that this week. I can't say I would buy the vinyl of this, but this is like a classic 3-star record for me. It lacked some captivation, and of course the predictableness of the music, but I definitely wouldn't turn it off. I just think they had a musical proclivity. Yes, I used the word proclivity, and that was kind of their overall theme. So that is my assessment of the album.
Cool. Well, this is, I think, a great example of you and I feeling each other out musically. What kind of risks do I think Frank's willing to take?
Yeah.
What are you going to find acceptable? And that really was this record for me. This is one that I've known for a little while. And really, I really dig the first half of this record. And then I usually get busy and don't hear the record end, and all of a sudden I'm in something else. So I get it. But again, I wanted to kind of put something out there, especially after last week's pick from you,
yes.
Cloud Nothing's Attack on Memory, where they got a little bit more experimental, even though I didn't dig it. I wanted to see how far that sound and that kind of push went for you. So I know I'm in the right direction when it comes to finding things that I think you'll really get into. Which made me happy.
Yeah.
But hey, look, there's nothing wrong with trying again. And I feel like, should this band magically get together, I think I'd totally go see them.
Oh, hands down.
And see how they perform as a unit. Because I think that might further sell some records for sure.
Yeah, and I researched some YouTube videos of the live performances. I was definitely impressed. Again, musically, it's a hard style of music, I think, to play, and it's a hard style of music to play constantly. As a guitar player and as a drummer, I mean, you want to get aggressive. At least that's how we used to plug up and play too. So the fact that you have to tone it down and really pay attention to the details, I mean, it's definitely something I couldn't do. So again, it's not a bad record. It's middle of the road for me, but if they come to town, I would definitely see them. So
very nice. What would you like to do next week?
All right, Mark. So I've been thinking of the 90s recently. I guess the whole decade. I've been thinking of the whole decade, Mark, of the 90s. Can you believe that?
Well, I've already given you 2 albums from the 90s.
Absolutely.
Why not keep going? No,
Why not keep going?
I'm pretty stoked on this one.
Yeah.
2017, the Lillingtons put out a record that I really loved. It got me to go back and rediscover this band. 1999's Death by Television. Really fun little record. I don't want to oversell this record to you, Frank. I'm gonna break it down really easy. Right, here's a quick and dirty. Pop punk science fiction misfits.
Oh, there you go.
So I think you'll dig this record. It's short and sweet. It's got a little bit of pop punk in it. It's got some punk in it. It's got some sci-fi. I think this will tickle your ivories in terms of a little bit of nostalgia, a little bit of fun. And then, of course, there are members of a band that I know you enjoy, the Teenage Bottle Rockets.
Oh, yeah.
Are in this band. So started here. It's always fun to check out, when you like a band, see where they came from. And this is one of them.
Cool, man. Well, I'm excited. I've definitely seen that record before, but I don't know songs on there. I am excited. I like that genre and everything you explained about it. So I look forward to listening to that and reviewing. And for you, we mentioned 90s. I'm sure at some point we'll have a grunge theme or alternative themed episode. But I've been listening to the following record a lot, and I always wanted to know what your thoughts were on it. So known for their 1996 hit Sucked Out, Knoxville Superdrag to me has always put out some great under-the-radar rock records. After the surprising success, they were given more financial support actually from Elektra to create more radio-friendly songs. So 1998's Head Trip in Every Key, co-produced by the late Jerry Finn, by the way, went against the label's orders, and this is the album the band wanted to create. The label obviously wasn't happy, but diehard fans were. So for you, my friend, I give you Head Trip in Every Key by Superdrag.
Very cool. Looking forward to it. Superdrag's one of those bands that, as much as people think I'd be really into them, I've just never taken that trip, man. So this is cool. This is giving me a good excuse to dive in.
Yeah, there's a lot of super bands out there. Like Superchunk is another band, right? Supertramp is another band that's a little bit older. And then there's Superdrag. So years I got them, honestly, confused. And then one night I think in the early 2000s, I saw them perform on one of the late shows, and I was like, wow. I was like, this is actually a pretty rocking song, and started going backwards in the category. So I'm excited, the catalog, I should say. So pretty excited to know what you think about it.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to checking out. I just Googled bands with the word super in their name.
What do you got? You got some good stuff?
Man, I'll tell you what. It looks like somebody just made a game for an SNES, because there's a ton of super everythings. El Super Show de Vasquez, the super villains. Oh, super. Black Moth, Super Rainbow, Super Cat. I might check out Super Cat based
Super
on
Cat for sure.
On personal preference alone. Super Power, Super Chick, Super Sacco, Super Fly, Super 8, and the Tab. Let's leave it there. Because literally, dude, this list goes on for super eternity.
That's amazing.
Excellent. Well, hey, that's another episode of.
That's another episode where we just look at bands with super on them. Maybe we'll do like a listening party, and you can have our on the spot reactions right there.
Sure. And I didn't mention anything about how super bad Bad Religion is.
Yeah, that's right.
We made it a whole episode.
A whole episode. That means we got to talk about it next episode.
There you go. All right, buddy.
Well, listen, there you have it, my friends. Thank you for checking us out. Remember, you can follow us on Instagram, now even YouTube. Listen to wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you very much, everyone, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, that.
See ya. Peace.
Pieces.